Now let's look at situation number 2 on page 70. And we're going to read this together. And the problem says alpha has the same ownership as in situation number 1. And I've just identified for you that that is a fee simple estate in 160 acres. Alpha grants a lease to Bravo. So Alpha grants a lease to Bravo, reserving a 1/8 royalty. So Alpha is going to keep that 1/8 royalty. So the question is, who owns the surface, who owns the minerals, who owns the working interest, who owns the royalty, and who owns the net revenue interest? So let's just break this down. So he owns 160 acres. This is going to be a 640 acre tract, section. Let's say it's section 9. And Alpha owns 160 acres. So let's just say that Alpha owns the northwest quarter. When he grants a lease to Bravo, he's reserving a 1/8 royalty. So let me show you what this is. In the law, we call this the grand bargain. And the way it works is that before Alpha has an oil and gas lease, he owns 100% of the working interest and 100% of the net revenue interest. If he owns 100% of the working interest, that means he's responsible for all the bills. So when he signs a lease with an oil and gas company, in this case Bravo, what he's saying is, okay, oil and gas company, I'm going to give you 100% of my working interest. And in exchange, I want a 1/8 royalty interest. So let's say this is his 1/8 royalty interest. So who owns the surface? Well, Alpha owns the surface. A lease does not convey a surface interest. So Alpha owns 100% of the surface. Okay? Who owns the minerals? Again, we're dealing with an oil and gas lease and not a conveyance. So Alpha did not convey his minerals to Bravo. Alpha merely leased his minerals to Bravo. Alpha remains the owner of the minerals. So Alpha owns 100% of the minerals and 100% of the surface. But when you grant an oil and gas lease, you're telling the oil and gas company, okay, oil and gas company, you are going to pay 100% of the bills. So you are going to have a 100% working interest. Bravo, instead of Alpha, now owns a working interest of 100%. The royalty payment belongs to Alpha, and that interest is a 12.5% royalty interest. That is a 1/8, and you know all you do is divide the 1 by the 1/8. For those of you who are not familiar with that, this is how you turn the fraction into a decimal. 1 divided 8 equal going to be that 0.125. So his actual interest as a decimal is 0.125. And this is how it's going to show up on the division order, as a 0.125. Now when we calculate the net revenue interest for Alpha is going to be this royalty interest, a 0.125. The net revenue interest for Bravo, though, is going to be 100% minus the 1/8. So here's 8/8, 100%. We're going to subtract out the 1/8, and now their net revenue interest is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7/8. So oil and gas company, I'm going to give you 100% of my working interest, and all I want is a 1/8 royalty interest. So the way we determine what Bravo's net revenue interest is, we take their ownership, 100% working interest, and we minus whatever the royalty is. And that's going to equal a 0.875. And so that is what Bravo's net revenue interest is going to be. It's going to be 87.5%. Or if we're going to write it as a decimal in the division order, it's going to be a 0.875 interest. The main thing to keep in mind here is that a lease is not a conveyance of the interest. A lease only gives the oil and gas company the right to drill on the land. A still owns all the surface, and A still owns 100% of the minerals. What they're giving up is their working interest, because if they sign a lease, Bravo gets a 100% working interest and Alpha gets 0% working interest. Now that's good for Alpha because Alpha doesn't have to pay any of the bills, but they're only getting a 1/8 royalty. So the net revenue interest for Bravo is going to be 100% because now they have 100% of the working interest minus their bills. Think about this when you get a paycheck and you have to pay the taxes. So 100% minus the taxes, in this case minus the royalty interest, is going to leave them with a 0.87.5 or 0.875 interest. Now let's look at situation number 3.